First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello everyone, this is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. As always, we appreciate you joining us. We are live streaming here out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, as we do every weekday, starting around 1 p.m., going throughout the afternoon, covering a wide range of topics. And right now, we are talking about a book, this book in particular, which is about a band called R.E.M. Now, I'm sure you know who R.E.M. is. The book, the name of this band is R.E.M., a biography. It's by Peter Carlin, and there's an event coming up here on Friday at Powell's where you can see him, along with Rick Emerson, talking about this book in conversation. We're going to have a conversation first right here. I am joined by both of these gentlemen right now. Guys, thanks for being here and having some time to talk about this with us. And, I want to talk about the event coming up and what to expect there. But starting off, Peter, I mean, you've written so many different books about so many different bands. In case people don't know, Bruce, Paul Simon, Paul McCartney, like lots of different legendary people. What was it about R.E.M. that stood out for you that you wanted this to be the subject of your next book?
They're a terrific band and so enormously innovative and influential to this day. And I was astounded when I went looking for a book to read about them that there wasn't anything that felt sort of new and up to date and that really kind of got into the texture of who they were and where they came from and why it was important. Their relationship to the Deep South, just the fact that they were becoming famous and working hard and became incredibly successful, sort of working in opposition to mainstream pop music culture. And I thought that was a fascinating story.
So when you go about telling a story like this and researching it, I mean, I'm just looking like behind the scenes. What does it take to write a biography about R.E.M.? Are you going out there, talking to the band, doing all of this research? I mean, there's so much that's in here. How do you go about even doing that?
Well, this book was a little different because I started working on it basically at the start of the pandemic. And so I spent the first couple of years working from home, as didn't we all? And so, I spent a lot of time, essentially I go back through the record, I pull up every news article, every magazine article, every interview, every scrap of video that I can find and create kind of a record and then start reaching out to people and talking to folks. And in this particular book, the guys in the band decided not to cooperate, though, I mean, I knew Peter Buck pretty well, having lived in Portland, and I knew their manager pretty well, just, as a friend for a long time and had met the other guys. So it was actually a very friendly type of relationship. And they all sort of found ways to be helpful in their own way. But it was also not a surprise and in a way kind of narrative centric that they were like, yeah, no, we're done promoting ourselves. So, it was like, have fun, go with God, and we'll see you on the other side, was their attitude.
So not against it, but just didn't want any part of it.
Yeah, it's like that was a project that they finished essentially 11 years ago, or however many, 13 years ago now. And so, they were at that point not terribly excited. I mean, and they were never really terribly cooperative with any biographers, and had a very sort of arm's length relationship with the media. They very much enjoy talking about their work. They very much do not enjoy and actively avoid talking about their personal lives, which is, when you think of it, like a really normal human way to be. Yeah. And I think that attitude is all through their music.
It's a normal human way to be, but although in this day and age now, it feels like there's so many people that want to share every single part of their lives. So I appreciate the fact that they still want to, here's my art, this is my personal life. That's the distance that comes out of that. Rick, because this conversation is coming up here at Powell's where you're going to be sitting down with Peter, talking about this and going more in depth. But for you, you're a huge music fan. I know that. R.E.M., where do they stand for you and just kind of this pantheon of those bands that came out around that era?
I mean, I think I have what I was thinking about this actually before we started. I have this sort of middle of the bell curve approach to R.E.M. in that I think like a lot of people, especially people, kind of maybe my age, I came to them initially through sort of the most obvious, hits, the easiest entry points, Stand and Losing My Religion and the one I love and all of that. And which, in some ways, they were a band, for me at least, for a long time, that I absolutely completely respected. Like my respect for them was actually kind of out of proportion to how much I really listened to them. And I think a lot of people, I mean, I sort of, for a long time I felt the same way about Bob Dylan. It was like I could absolutely, if somebody asked me, does Bob Dylan matter? Is he important? Does he have integrity? I'd be like, yes, yes, yes. I mean, to the nth degree. But at the same time, it's not like I was just sitting around with Biograph and just power loading Dylan all day. And I think I think R.E.M. was very much the same way in that. And I think like a lot of people who maybe who did not identify as alternative fans first and foremost, I learned about R.E.M. or learned about them via the bands they influenced that I loved, or bands that I listened to that were like R.E.M. Like that's the model. I mean, it's hard to think of a band, where Colin Malloy from the Decemberists and Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne and Courtney Love have all said, like, that's the model. That's who we want to be. And, and that, I think for a lot of people, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to sit down and really give them a go now.
Yeah, and that is so true. When you think about that, about how many different bands were influenced by R.E.M. from that era, and just how, I guess, just how different they were when they were starting this off. Peter, something I want to ask you for researching this. There is all the public things that people know about R.E.M., but you're getting in there in some of those details. What was maybe some of the, I don't know if you can give us this, what are the most surprising things that you learned about in writing this book about R.E.M.?
Well, one of the things is how influential the art department at the University of Georgia was, and not just on R.E.M., but on virtually every band that came out of Athens, which is a lot of bands. If you think about it, it's like the B-52s came before R.E.M., and then there was Pylon, and then there was R.E.M. and Love Tractor, and Love Tractor is probably less well known, but they're a great band, and they're still out there playing, every so often. And one of the things that they all had in common was they were either students at or very adjacent to the art department there, where the Lamar Dodd School of Art had been, the guy whose name, became the name of the school, Lamar Dodd, in the 60s, began to staff up his faculty with, he wanted like really happening artists. And so he ended up hiring a bunch of kind of hippie bohemian types, and they stuck around, and their aesthetic and this idea of inspiration over craft, the idea that you should be able to, with a passion and some sense of creativity, any artist can make work without having to be super sophisticated. And there was also an influence of folk culture and that kind of thing. And so putting these things together, they encourage their students to essentially do what's in your heart. Don't worry about becoming an expert at something. And there was one woman who was actually a painting instructor who became very close to Michael Stipe and many of the other musicians. And she recalled telling her students at one point, they were all working on their easels and listening to music and talking about music. And they asked her if they thought, punk rock was great art or great rock and roll. And she said, listen, if you can't play it on a $50 guitar from Sears, that ain't rock and roll. So, that was the attitude that they were getting in their painting classes that was inspiring them to put together bands. A lot of bands, Pylon, Love Tractor, the B-52s were like, okay, let's form a band. We're going to be a band. What instrument do you want to learn how to play? Like, they literally did not know how to play until they decided to be in a band. And, R.E.M. was more sophisticated, but, in their own way before that. Mike Mills and Bill Berry had been in bands and played shows throughout high school. Peter Buck had been practicing guitar nonstop since he was like 13 years old. Michael sang in cover bands and stuff in St. Louis and then in Athens. And so they came together with a certain kind of, level of experience. But on the other hand, they were also very excited by this idea of enlightened amateurism.
Wow. And so looking at it from that art perspective, and having that kind of influence on it, that is really interesting. I mean, B-52, so they didn't know how to play any instruments when they, like that to me is mind-boggling in its own right. Well, let's talk about this event coming up here at Powell's, where you guys are going to be having a conversation talking about this, and people are going to get the chance. It's Friday, November 8th, and to come out and discuss this. Rick, for you, when you frame a conversation like this, I guess what can people expect from this event, as far as what you guys are going to be talking about when they're attending there? I threw you that one. What to expect, Rick?
I hope I'm not pulling back the curtain too much here to say. So this sort of thing gets coordinated through Powell's and then through Peter's publisher, and they sort of make everything, coordinate all the details and everything, and so then they can just sort of present it to Peter and be like, be here at this time, and we'll talk about this thing and whatever. And anyway, when this sort of introductions were going around via email, and again, I hope I'm not disclosing confidences here, but Peter sort of introduced me to his publicist via email by saying, "Hey, this is Rick Emerson. He's kind of a handful, but he means well." And I was like, well, I can't really say anything about that. So Peter, so Peter and I have known each other for, I want to say like 20 years, which doesn't seem possible, yet seems totally
more than
possible.
that. More than that. Wow. I got the call to go on Rick's show, I think, very soon after I started being the TV critic at the Oregonian in late 2000. So it might have been early 2001. And my first reaction was, no, I don't want to be a part of this guy's show. Like, why do I want to do talk radio? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, I hate talk radio. Talk radio is full of idiots. It's like, I'm not doing this. But then for whatever reason, I said, okay. Because I'm an attention whore. And I remember very vividly sitting there with the phone up to my ear, listening to the show while they were waiting to patch me through. And I was like, wait a minute. This is really good. Like, I really like these people. Like, this is really cool. This guy is really smart and funny. And it was like, and then I was just in. So that's how it was. And of course, that built into the years and years of antagonism that Rick and I have, the famous antagonism we have for one another.
It's it's sort of a life-loving hate. That's really what it is. Every Waldorf needs a Statler. Every Statler needs a Waldorf.
I prefer to think of it as a hate-loving life, but go ahead.
There you go. That's also, I lifted that line from Chuck D, so I should send him a royalty for that. I really quickly, I will say that this is like, all kidding aside, this is like, so again, it's been, so I guess Peter and I have known each other since before I had to wear like bifocals, and when I was early in the draft of this book that I put out a couple of years ago, I sent an early, frankly, terrible draft to Peter, and he sent back something, and he was like a lot of notes, and actually he sent me two of the best notes I've ever gotten in my life, which is, and this sounds like a joke, but it's serious. It really is true. It's exactly the sort of thing that you need if you kind of don't know what you're doing, which I did not. And he said, and I've got them framed, actually, they're in my office, and it's,
no way.
And there were two things he circled, and the first one he circled, and then in red, he just said like, dude, no. and then later on, and there were other more substantive detailed notes, but then later on there was another one where it was like he'd highlighted something and he was just like, don't do this. And I was like, okay, done. And I've never done those things again. So it's, yes, we have a jocular and multi-layered relationship.
I think this is a perfect example of what people can expect coming down to Powell's to this. This right there. They mean well. All right. So again,
so does my dog Ralph, who just noticed that the postman came here. And so if you notice me lunging to my right, it was to keep him from barking hysterically, which is what he very much wants to be doing this minute.
What kind of dog is Ralph?
Ralph is a boxer mix, and talk about a handful.
Okay. Can Ralph be on camera for a second?
Well, he's got to go check for it. Ralph, come here, buddy.
Okay. I just figure if we're going to wrap it up, we're talking about Ralph, right? We got to pay this off,
The postal carrier might have a pizza in his bag or something too, so you never know.
Wait, where'd he go?
Oh, there we go.
There he is. Ralph,
all right.
The dog, people.
That is exactly what the people want. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much, for having some time to talk to me today about this too, and I really appreciate it. And again, everybody, Friday at Powell's, you can come see these two gentlemen make fun of each other and talk about this book, which again, Peter, you're an amazing writer, and all of these stories that you've been able to tell have been fascinating. I can't wait to read this one, learn more about R.E.M. and their influence. So I appreciate
it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I want to say I want to second that. I've read it. It is a fantastic book. It is really quite something.
Thank you.
Well, and everybody can pick up their copy and, of course, go see you guys in person on Friday. Thanks for having some time for us.
Thank you.
My pleasure, Greg. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And bye to Ralph, too.
Oh, sure.
For everybody watching, this is Fox 12 Now. We're going to sign off here for just a minute. We'll be back with more here throughout the afternoon, but you can check out all of our segments on the Fox 12 Oregon YouTube channel, kptv.com, or the Fox 12 Now tab, or on the Fox 12 Oregon app. So thanks for joining us. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.